Hi, friends and family,
Welcome to Hope After Addiction
with your hosts, Katie Comer.
and Chelsea McLeod.
Hi, welcome back to Hope After Addiction. We're so excited that you have decided to join us today. Chelsea, how are you today?
I am good.
How has your week
Good.
been?
It's been good. It's been a little crazy. Lots
Yeah.
of deadlines and work, and we're headed to the mountains this weekend. It's our yearly
Oh,
trip. But
the
first one,
Smokies?
yes, Lake
Aw.
Junaluska, and it's my papa's weekend. They've been doing it since my mom and aunt and uncle were little. So I've been going since I was a baby, but he passed in March, so it's
Yeah.
the first year without him. So it'll be very bittersweet.
Oh,
I'll probably have a little writing come out of it, but it'll be a sweet
Oh.
time.
you do
Yeah.
well on that. I love your writing. So,
Thank you. Thank you. How have you been? What's been
Yeah.
going on?
yeah, so I don't know when you listen to this, but right now it's in the fall. We just got done with Halloween. And so we had a fun time with the kids. They dressed up, and we have a yearly tradition where we go to see my sister and spend the night at her house, do the chili, and have a sleepover with the kids. She has kids the same age as mine, so it's super fun. We had a really good time.
Yeah. How much fun is that, a sleepover with everybody?
I know.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is
It's fun.
crazy.
We don't get a lot of sleep,
It's chaos.
but it's fun.
Yeah.
And the kids are such fun ages, and they have lots of candy, but it's fine.
Lots of
Yeah.
no sleep.
Yeah,
with
lots
that
of no
candy.
sleep, lots of sugar. So, but
So
it's fun.
much
It's a fun time. So we just got done with that. So now we're back in the swing of things. So
Yeah. Back to
bring
that.
on Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Amen
So,
to that.
yay.
I love this time of year.
I know, it's so fun.
Sweet. I know. It's my favorite.
So today our topic is very interesting, and most people do it when
Yep.
you have a loved one who's struggling with addiction, and sometimes you don't recognize it in yourself. So this is why it's
Yes.
important to talk about, because you might not recognize that you do this, but you do it, and so it's enabling.
It's a big
Yeah,
one.
we say enabling when helping hurts, because you think you're helping.
But you're hurting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And we've all done it. So I'm not,
I
I'm not
did it.
pointing fingers. Yeah, we did it. Yeah.
Yeah, so for me, when I was thinking back to enabling and what that looked like in my journey, I set boundaries with Adam pretty early on into his addiction. So I had to actually had to ask Adam.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't really know. I'm sure I did it. I'm just trying to think back on what I did specifically to enable him. And I think that it was important for me to ask Adam
Yes.
what specifically I did that kind of encouraged his addiction in that moment. So for me, I'll just give some examples on what I did. Was before my family found out about Adam's addiction, but I knew about it, thinking that he was like getting help. I would make a white lie. Like, he's doing this, so he can't come to this. Like, he's doing something, yes, but he's not doing what I say he's doing, so
exactly right.
it's just kind of encouraging his behavior, into that addiction. Like, it's like, it's encouraging that addiction. So, I made a lot of excuses for Adam.
Yes.
If he left church early, I'm sure his stomach hurt.
Lots of stomach aches and addiction.
Yeah,
That
he's
we don't
not feeling
realize.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's his addiction, but I didn't want my family to know. So I made lots of excuses for him. So he specifically remembered me helping him out that way. Hey, just tell him this. I'm just, well, no.
Yes.
No, I'm not going to lie for you. This is not how we're doing things. But it's hard, when nobody knew about it.
Or if you didn't know about it.
Yeah, right.
know?
Yeah.
Like-
I didn't know how bad it was even.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think for me, I did that early on. Now, like I said, in my story, I set those boundaries up pretty soon. Once he relapsed several times, I realized I can't do this on my own. I had to bring in other people into my story. So that's when I told my sister. That's when I told my parents. So they were surrounding me and encouraging me to help Adam get, so we had like the intervention
Yeah.
so that he knew that they knew. So he could no longer manipulate in that area. A lot of addicts are great manipulators.
Yes, they are.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just like a common theme, right? They just manipulate their way into lies. And I always call it like a spider web of lies. I'm like, how do you even keep up with the lies that you have told? I honestly did not understand it. Like, I mean, like I'm exhausted hearing all the lies, right? Yeah. So they're master manipulators, right? But for the loved one who does not want to enable, I do believe that having a good support system to go alongside of you helps decrease the amount of enabling.
It does. Well, and that's one of those things we encourage you not to isolate, because if you isolate without support, you're more drawn to the manipulation of the lies rather than the truth of the support that's there to speak that truth into your heart and your mind.
Right.
So, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. So for me, that's what those few things. And I was like trying to rack my brain. I was like, I feel like I was pretty good. And then I was like, well, no. Pump the brakes. This is what you did. And I was like, oh, yeah, I did do that. I did make a lot of excuses for you. I did tell a white lie here and there, you know. And that just ultimately helped feed his addiction, essentially, because once other people knew, it was harder for him to live in that life. In that lifestyle.
Sure. They have more people to hold accountable to.
Yeah.
And that know what's going on.
Yeah. So outside of, you know, that, I think it's also important to point out that having that support system is healthy for them, but it's also very healthy for you. And we've talked about that.
Yeah.
In other podcasts, so go back and take a listen.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, having that support system is very beneficial for the addict, but it's also very beneficial for you to have that support system. Tell people. I know it's embarrassing. I know it's hard. And once they know, there's not unknowing it.
Right.
But you got to have friends, family there to help walk alongside of you and say, like, why are you doing this? Why are you letting him back into the house? Like, why are you doing this? That is a dumb idea. You know, have somebody be straight shooters.
Speak wisdom.
Yeah, and speak wisdom into your life.
And to be strength when you can. And also know that it's okay to be particular with who you share stuff with, because not all good advice is God advice. And so choose wisely. Choose ones that are going to speak wisdom, that are going to speak truth, that are going to walk you with strength, but within truth. But
Yeah.
Truth. Yeah.
But with truth. Yeah. What about you? What did you know off the top of your head how you enabled, or did you have to ask John?
No, I knew a lot because, and I think this is one difference with Katie and I, which is so cool for her, and just props to her dad and her mom, and just, I dealt with a lot more codependency than Katie did. So I think that I enabled a little bit longer because I had not developed that backbone yet. I have that backbone now, but I had not.
We got the backbone now,
right.
ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
But I had not completely created that, and I was living hours away from my family.
That's hard.
I didn't have that support that Katie had, and I had kept it pretty hidden. Same thing, the lies, the little white lies of he's just not feeling good, or he's just had a tough day. I definitely did ask John. I was like, tell me the top ways, because one thing John's been good about is exposing stuff to me, just so that I know. And if there were things that he did in the fit of his addiction, being like, hey, Chelsea, this is what I did. Like, these are the signs, but one of the biggest things was he had moved back to town. I had an established business. So I paid most of the bills, but his money still didn't add up. And there was a lot of times he was starting a company up, and I paid more money than I should have when his wasn't. He'd be like, hey, I can't pay the guys right now. But what I was actually doing is paying bills so that he could pay his drugs and buy his drugs. One of the biggest ones, and we see this a lot, is his first rehab. We lived on the coast, and he was in Georgia inwards. But we had a hurricane come into town. And the first one I had experienced, I was actually out of the country. This one, I was at home, and I was scared. And so he called, and he wanted to come home to save us from the hurricane.
Sweet.
Yes, precious.
That's so sweet of him. Sweet.
Yeah, so his mom and I both enabled. We're like, yes, we'll come get you. He's like, hey, I will go back as soon as the hurricane's over. all the things. So his mom drove to get him before the hurricane hit. They got the gas and the water and everything on the way back. He never went back to that rehab afterwards. So that was the biggest thing.
Just
and
a
there
big
is
out
some,
for him.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was, it was, and he didn't see that at the time because he's very
really?
protective of us.
So he didn't do that intentionally?
No.
Oh,
And that's what he
okay.
talks about. A lot of their manipulation is a psychological. They don't realize they're doing it. But now, years later, he was like, I so manipulated my way out of that place.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And
I would have thought that he would have like been doing that intentionally. I just got to get home so I can get out of this place, you know.
No, it killed him to think that there was a Cat 4 hurricane coming to the area and his mom and me in the area about to be pummeled by it.
Oh, man.
But later
Okay.
he was like, I so worked my way out of that one. So that was a big way. But all the things, well, I was going to say about leaving early. We see that a lot. And that's one of those things. If your
rehab?
loved one, yes.
Yeah.
If your loved one is going through or has gone through, there is something to be said about them finishing that.
Oh, yeah.
And when you allow them to come home early or to leave, for them to call and be like, this place is awful.
Yeah.
It's terrible. The food's terrible. The beds. I mean, that's a story we hear a lot, but enabling them is allowing them to leave early. I don't care how long they've been there because there is something to be said about them finishing a program for their internal psychological mindset on that. When they finish, it gives them power and freedom to know I did this and I can walk forward. And so that was probably one of my biggest ways was letting him leave. God worked it out for sure because he ended up at S2L, which in turn changed his entire life.
Yeah.
But even just doing things they won't do for themselves. And I'm a perfectionist. And I talked about this in some of the earlier ones, but I just thought if I could keep everything together, bills paid, the house perfect, meals on the table, that he wouldn't want to do addiction. So I did everything, and he should have been doing it. And y'all, if we continue to carry them, they will never learn to walk. I mean, you think about a child, if you carry your baby their whole life, they will never know how to use their legs.
Yeah.
So I was carrying him and not letting him walk on his own.
That's good. That's a
That
good
did some
vision.
damage.
Yeah. So one of the things I hear a lot from Adam, who is over S2L, is we have got to make it for you. You have got to make it as difficult as it can be to live in that sin, to live in addiction. If you make it somewhat easy, they're going to stay in that addiction. You have to make it so difficult to leave. You know what I mean? Like so difficult. Or to stay. To stay in that addiction.
Yeah.
You've got to make it so difficult to stay in the addiction. So what does that look like? Right? What does that look like? Well, you hit on it. A lot of times loved ones, I remember when Adam, I wasn't speaking to him at the moment. I wasn't speaking to him at the moment when he went to S2L. His parents dropped him off, and he went there thinking it was like a 30-day program. And he sat in the office. They were dropping him off, and they said, okay, you'll be here. I think it was 90 days at the time when they were going back then. It was 90 days, and he kind of looked at him, and his parents were like, bye. You know, so like, we'll see you later. So making it very difficult to stay in that addiction. So that's one thing, is making them stay at the rehab.
Yes.
We have a lot of times that these guys will come into the program and they just miss and I get it.
Yeah.
They miss their families.
It's hard.
Especially if they have little kids at home. They feel like they're missing out on milestones. But if they know that they can manipulate you into picking them up early, they're going to do it. And so you picking them up is enabling them. Point blank, that is enabling, right? So that's a big one. That's a big one we see. That's one that you can say, oh, yeah, well, duh, I'm not going to pick them up from rehab. But you will hear
Until they call.
the stories that you're going to hear it. So I remember Adam's parents, when he found out it was 90 days, they were like, we're not coming to get you. Like, we're not going to come and get you. And they left him no car. There's no vehicles, you know. So they made it really difficult for him, you know, to stay in that addiction. So,
Well, and that's an important one, and that's a hard one. And I remember walking through this with my brother, and my mom just kept picking him up because she loved him.
Yeah.
And I told Mama when we were going through that, because I was a sister of it, and so that was hard. But I was like, I don't have a child. I didn't at that point. So I didn't know what it felt like to leave your son in jail. I didn't know what it felt like to leave your son on the streets. But it's one thing that Mama finally did. And I said, Mama, you have got to let him sit in jail to feel this, because he knows that you will always pick him up. And if you always keep doing it, he will always keep doing it. And Mama left him in jail for, it was weeks. And that was finally, Ethan never went back to jail after that. And so it's hard because it may mean your son or daughter sleeping on the streets.
I know.
It may mean the thought of them being out in the cold or without meals, or, I mean, just so many things that are hard when you love them. And, you know, when I went through Al-Anon years ago, lovingly detaching was the word that I learned and that I stayed on and stood on, because I love them and detached from them because I had to, and because it was what was best for them. Two of the quotes that changed my life going through this with John was, well, I will say the first one: if an addict is happy with you, you are most likely enabling. If an addict is sad, or I should say mad with you, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, because stepping back from enabling will come with a pushback. You are going to get some fights out of it. You're going to get some terrible words that it's all your fault, whatever it may be.
Why are you doing this to me?
Yes, you don't love me.
Yeah.
You know, this is your fault. You will get, and I go back to Exodus 14:14, be still and the Lord will fight for you.
Yeah.
So when you put that foot down, when you put that boundary up, stay strong with God and know that he will fight with you. The other one that I love, and this is a hard one to say, and I'm going to say it because it changed my life, but if you baby an addict, you will bury an addict. That's a tough one. I needed to hear that because I had to realize John's DOC, drug of choice, was opiates. And if I continue to supply his life with drugs and enable him to walk into that, and if he came into one of those things of overdose, whatever it may be, I would have wished that I would have changed my mind and stood strong on not enabling him.
Yeah.
And so I needed to hear that one. It was a very hard one to hear, but I needed that in walking through it with him. And that's what gave me the courage to finally put those boundaries down and stop enabling him.
I don't want to bury him.
No.
Yeah.
And I knew I'd be part of that.
Yeah. So when we do these podcasts and we think and we talk about kind of some of our points that we're going through, we talk about the loved ones that are listening to this that did have to bury their loved ones.
Yep.
That you're listening and say, man, I recognize that in myself. And we sometimes like, oh man, that just might be harsh for you to say that. I don't know if you should say that. I don't know. But we were talking about that and we said, no, could you imagine like what they would give to be able to stop that behavior? And not that it's their fault.
Yeah. No.
Not that it's their fault, but that they could tell you, stop that behavior or you will end up burying your loved one. They would tell you that.
Yep.
So we recognize as we share this, that we have all different kinds of loved ones that are watching, right? That we have loved ones that are walking in the trenches, like walking in the addiction with their loved ones. They have not been healed from it. We have loved ones who have reconciled. That's Chelsea and I's story. And we're forever grateful for that, that God reconciled that. But we have loved ones that did lose their loved one to addiction and that they're trying to find some sort of healing. And those words are like, if I could tell somebody, hey, don't do this. Do not lie for them. Do not bail them out of that rehab or you will bury them. Yeah. They would tell you that. And so we're not going to hold back on that truth. Just, we are tremendously sorry for your loss, but we know that you would sit up here with us and say, fight and do not enable, because you enabling is in fact hurting them. Yeah. You're helping them, or so you think, because you love them and you want them to be near you, but you are hurting them in the most awful way by enabling them.
Yeah. And I have that story. I mean, y'all know my dad overdosed
Right.
like 12 hours after Jasper was born.
Yeah.
And there are thoughts in my head is what could I have done differently? I didn't have that relationship with him, but there are things that I could have done differently to be like, hey, will you go get help? Hey, if we sent you to a program, would you get help? And so I also have that story of a loved one that died from this and thoughts of what could I have done differently for his outcome to be different. Not that it's my fault, but it's what could I have done different to have a different outcome and to have potentially been able to have that healthy relationship with him.
Yeah.
So it's
hard to do the what ifs.
Oh, it is.
And that's, that's not our goal for you if you're listening
No.
but I know you do. And so, and that's hard, but
it's a natural.
And something that I wanted to bring up, we will, we'll get back to the enabling in a second, but it just reminded me, we'll have here and there guest speakers on our podcast that have different stories than ours. Yeah. So we are going to have somebody on here who did lose a loved one to addiction and how they handled it, what they did, what maybe they would have done different, like all the things that maybe might be encouragement to you listening that has lost a loved one. We're going to make sure that we have those different types of stories that can be an encouragement to you. Someone whose loved one's still living in the addiction. So just stay tuned for that. We'll make sure to let y'all know on our socials when those are coming up.
For sure. There was something. Well, one of the things I was thinking about, have you ever heard of like the butterfly effect, that you have the cocoon and the butterfly is getting ready to just spread its wings and to become beautiful. And us as enablers, if we like just do a little split so that butterfly can come out, or break it open just a little bit. Yeah. To help them come out of that cocoon, they'll never be ready. Like that butterfly, your loved one will come out when he's ready, when she's ready, outside of the help that we choose to give them. And so sometimes our help can actually damage them in that cocoon because they're not ready to fly yet. Which is a hard one, but I always love that butterfly effect for even just raising children, but addiction, it was a big one for me. And something I was just thinking about when I heard that, and I'm sure you've heard this too, walking through this for so many years, but one of the top things I would say that almost every person walking through addiction has told John, is that the best thing my family, my wife, my mom, my dad ever did was to cut me off. Oh, yeah. Was to put the boundaries down. Yeah. And so I want to encourage you, if you're struggling doing that now, you may get pushback, but one day they will say, thank you, Mama. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Daddy. Like, thank you, my wife, for being strong and putting her foot down. Oh, man, that's so good. Because that's what saved me. Like, that's what got my help finally. Because if we're always cushioning that fall, like, they never know what that rock bottom feels like. Yeah. And I didn't realize when I was reading back my journal, I got my journal out a few weeks ago, and it was a lot. I was reading through it. But I did notice myself putting those boundaries down, and Adam, giving me the sob. I remember writing it down saying, he just doesn't think that I love him. He's saying, why are you doing this to our marriage? Why are you giving up on our marriage? Yeah. That was him pushing back because I was setting those boundaries up. So you're gonna hear that. Expect it. Yeah, you're gonna hear the pushback. But like you said, I think that's so wise. If they're happy with you and you're doing something wrong. You're doing something. You're making it comfortable for them to stay in that addiction. But if they're upset with you, they're sad with you, they're mad at you, then you're giving them the boundaries that they need to step out of that lifestyle of addiction. And know when you start putting these boundaries down and quit enabling, when you start shutting those doors to your house and locking this window and locking this bolt, they're going to go to every side of your house. Yeah. They're going to come through the attic. They're going to come through the fireplace. Yeah. Just theoretically, imagery of it. Yeah, not really like Santa. They're going to, exactly. I mean, that'd be pretty cool, but they're going to come to every avenue. So know and expect that they may come from this side, and you like lock that door harder and be like, no. Yeah. Like this, I love you. This is why I'm doing this. Right. Yeah. Which is, it's hard. It's hard. Yeah. Very hard. Well, do you have anything else on enabling when helping hurts? Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's, so we could talk about that one for days, but.
I know. Well, and we probably will,
we will
swing back around
Yeah.
and cover it again. So that does bring up something. As you're listening to these podcasts and you're like, man, I wish I knew the answer to this, or how did you deal with this? We do have an email that you can go to and ask questions. And we will make sure we hit those on our podcast. But it's hopeafteraddiction@gmail.com. That's hopeafteraddiction@gmail.com. We also have our socials. You can private message us through Instagram or Facebook, Hope After Addiction. Find us on there. Give us a follow.
Yes.
We do check all that. So just make sure that you're asking those questions, because we do want to answer some of those questions, push back on something that we said. We love to be challenged in that, so that way we can address that.
Absolutely.
So just let us know. And I'm super excited to announce that we are going to be having our first guest speaker coming up in the next week or two. So we are having our husbands.
Y'all get excited.
We're having our husbands on the podcast.
Yes,
So we're so excited I'm going to ask John some questions, and she's going to ask Adam some questions, or both. I'm going to ask them questions. She's going to ask us questions. So we're excited about that. So stay tuned for that. And we are going to have other guest speakers, like I said earlier, through different stages. So
it's going to be good.
I'm excited. So thank you. Thank you for joining us today with Hope After Addiction. We are so glad you joined us. Be blessed. Thank you.